We got Jeff Pasquino, of course, in with the fantasy segment of the week where he helps you set your Week 5 fantasy football lineup. If you have a fantasy football question for Jeff Pasquino from thefootballguys.com, send us a text message at 609-403-0973, 609-403-0973, and let us know your questions for Jeff. Let's get into it, Jeff. The Thursday night game tonight, we got some offensive fireworks. We got Patriots and Bucks. Who should be active in the Thursday night game tonight?
Pretty much everybody you can. This is probably going to be the highest scoring game of the week, except maybe Green Bay, Dallas. Something goes way out of whack, but we're expecting Tampa Bay to throw the ball a lot. You got Jameis Winston, we got Mike Evans, and Deshaun Jackson, and even Cameron Brate may get some targets. But and you got Brady who's going to throw the ball a lot as well because the Patriots defense is just terrible. It should be a shootout. So you know, Cook, you got Amendola. Amendola's got a great matchup if you're looking for a guy that's a little off the radar, and of course Gronkowski.
All right, let's look at some quarterbacks this week that might be hanging under the radar. Deshaun Watson playing Kansas City. Is Deshaun Watson all of a sudden a fantasy starter?
He is a starter this week a little bit by default because some of the other quarterbacks are in some rough matchups. And, of course, Watson had a great game, but the Kansas City defense is not to be messed around with. So he's the lower-end quarterback one.
All right, we're looking at this week. Matthew Stafford was disappointing last week for owners. How about against Carolina, one of the better defenses this week?
This is a game I think could be a little bit more high-scoring than people might think. Cam Newton had a great game last week. He runs better on the turf. He throws better on the turf for some reason, too. So I think this game could have a lot more points. So I like Stafford.
Jared Goff's been a good fantasy quarterback, but he's got Seattle this week. They're the highest-scoring team in the league, the Rams are. But is Jared Goff a fantasy starting quarterback this week?
Yeah, something's got to give here, and I think that the Rams are probably going to try and run the ball more than they throw. So I think that Goff is more in the quarterback 2 category this week.
All right, we're talking with Jeff Pasquino, footballguys.com, taking a look at some of the quarterbacks that you should potentially be thinking about this week. How about we talk about one guy, Phillip Rivers, last week. He had a pretty good game, but he's traveling across the country against that Giants defense. Do you like Phillip Rivers this week?
There's no team I think that's probably going to run the ball. I think that you're going to get Gurley more in the mix because the Giants' secondary is probably one of the tougher ones. So I tend to stay away from Rivers in the passing game this week.
All right, a couple of quarterbacks for you guys there. Of course, Jeff will give you some under-the-radar players in just a minute. Let's go over to the running back position and ask him about some of the questions that are coming in. Remember, if you have a fantasy football question for Jeff, send us a text at 403-0973. What about the running back in New York for the Giants? What are you doing with the Giants running back situation?
I'm still in wait-and-see mode. I think that we had a little bit of impressiveness coming from the rookie for the Giants from Gallman, but I'm still not impressed with that. And here's my sleeper quarterback, Eli Manning. They're going to throw the ball a lot, and shouldn't be a surprise. That's all they can do to move the ball.
All right. What about Jay Ajayi, man? A lot of owners loved him this year. What happened to that offense? Are you a Ajayi guy for fantasy now?
Well, Miami's whole schedule has gotten messed up because they missed week 1. They haven't been home at all. They had to go to London. This is really their home opener, which is strange for week 5, but it's just how it broke down. If they're smart, they just give the ball to Ajayi and try to get him 20-plus touches this week. I don't know if that's going to result in 100 yards, but it's probably their best effort because he is their best player.
We're looking at running backs now. I got one for you that a lot of people probably want to know. In Minnesota with Dalvin Cook out, what about Latavius Murray this week?
I like him more in PPR leagues because I think they actually catches the ball. He had 75 catches last 2 years for the Raiders. But I think that he's going to be getting the dominant amount of the work. But Chicago is actually very good against the run, only 87 yards of rushing against for not a good team. So it's a mixed bag for him, but I like him more in PPR leagues.
What about if you're a Jordan Howard owner? You got a rookie quarterback Monday night against a very good Vikings defense. Howard, what are you saying there?
Again, they're going to get the ball on the talented players. So Jordan Howard and Tarek Cohen are going to get the ball most of the time. So I trust them. It's still a tough defense, but you got to trust the best players on your team.
If Ty Montgomery can't go, who should be active as Green Bay's running back?
In a word, none. I think it's going to be it's going to be a 2 or 3 headed monster, so it's probably not enough touches to go around to make anybody really happy.
Jeff Pasquino, footballguys.com, answering your Week 5 fantasy football questions. We'll get to your questions in a minute. Send us a text, 609-403-0973. A couple quick wide receiver questions for Jeff before we get to your questions out there. Are you still riding the Chris Hogan train tonight?
I think you have to. I think, again, the over-under in this game is almost 56 points. That means 28 for each side. They're going to throw the ball a lot. I think that you get Hogan, and you got 2 other targets and James White of the backfield. So I think that he makes it around. Hogan looks like he's a solid wide receiver, too, with upside.
Larry Fitzgerald killed the Eagles. Will he do it again this week?
Secondary for the Eagles is their weakness right now. And Carson Palmer keeps putting up 300-yard games, so he's another sleeper quarterback. I think Fitzgerald looks good, and I think Jerron Brown could get open deep.
We're looking at some wide receivers real fast before we get to your question. Let's get another one in there. What about Stephon Diggs without Bradford? He's been one of the better quarterbacks with Bradford.
Yeah, I think Diggs is going to get open. He's had some tough defensive matchups, but I think the Bears have no answer for Diggs or Thielen. That's how they're going to move the ball for Minnesota this week.
All right, one more. How about DeAndre Hopkins now with Watson? Does that put him back into that elite fantasy receiver?
Well, in PPR leagues, he's always been there because he's getting a ton of targets. But I think that he's a solid wide receiver, too, with upside to score in any given week.
Okay, Jeff, my turn to get to ask you. So what the listeners want to know, Joe from Vineland says, should I start Marshawn Lynch this week?
The Ravens are a mess, and they're going to rely – the Raiders are going to rely on moving the ball with Jared Cook and Marshawn Lynch. So the answer is yes.
Heard you talking about Carson Palmer a minute ago. Rivers or Palmer, another listener wants to know.
I have Palmer higher than Rivers.
Winston or Dak staying at the quarterback position?
Very close. We have them 3 and 4. I slightly edge Winston for the higher total of the game.
Okay, in a PPR league, Stewart or Mixon?
Mixon is a very sleeper running back. He gets a lot of work, so I like him.
PPR league also, Amendola or Powell?
I would go with Amendola just because I really like that matchup tonight for a lot of points.
Gillislee or Landry in a PPR flex?
I would go with Landry just because I think it's going to be more throwing and not a Gillislee game.
Also flex who to start, Rashad Matthews, James White, Thomas Rawls, or Devontae Adams if he plays?
I would go with James White, I think, was one of those options. I think all the other guys have some question marks as far as the game's script, but James White will be definitely used tonight.
And I did hear you mention the name Dalvin Cook, or Mike mentioned it as well, but somebody had Dalvin Cook. Who's the better replacement, Vikings McKinnon or the Lions Theo Riddick?
I can't trust Riddick, especially without Abdullah. So I think you got to go with McKinnon, but he's kind of banged up. I like the sleeper to pick up is McKissick for Seattle, who could get some work later on.
How about Ellington or McKinnon if you had that pairing to choose between?
Who was the first one?
Ellington.
Andre Ellington, yeah.
Andre Ellington. Yeah, I can't trust him unless it's a PPR league, so as a flex, maybe.
All right, Jeff Pasquino, footballguys.com, answering your Week 5 fantasy football questions. We'll do it again next week. But before we go, Jeff's got some under-the-radar sleeper type of guys that he thinks you should be playing this week. And those guys are?
Well, one quarterback that we haven't mentioned is Jacoby Brissett against the 49ers. He could have some upside, especially on that turf. Also on the turf, like Christian McCaffrey, a running back, especially in PPR leagues. And don't sleep on Doug Martin that may be in the mix tonight. Wide receivers, we mentioned Hogan. We mentioned all the guys for the game tonight, but I think Nelson Aguilar for the Eagles. I think he actually has a pretty good matchup, and he could get deep because they're going to be all over Alshon Jeffrey this week.
All right, there you go, Jeff Pasquino, footballguys.com. Back again next week with the Week 6. The season is flying by. We're past the quarter pole. Fantasy football, get your lineups in there tonight. Don't forget your Patriots and Bucks. And no London game this week, so you don't have to get up early to get those guys in the lineup. But Jeff Pasquino will be back next week with another edition of the Fantasy Focus here on the Sports Bash. Thanks, pal. Good luck to you.
Good luck, everybody. Enjoy the games.